Hey there, welcome. Cynthia here. We're doing the Solare block of the month. It's month number 10. Hey, and if you haven't been watching, check out all my previous videos for the other months ahead, and check out the description below because I have lots of links for Banyan Batiks, that's the fabric you're using, for the lovely Bound to Be Quilting ladies who made this awesome pattern, for Adirondack Quilts, that's where I work, and all the stuff that's the cool things and gadgets that I'm using. There are 3 blocks this month. That's right. 1, 2, 3. We have, let's see, Sawtooth Star, we have 1904 Star, and we have Circling Swallows. We're making one of each of these. It's using all the same fabric for each one. So let's dig in and see what this month has in store. Come on, let's go. All right, so first square that we're going to do is the Sawtooth Star. Again, just one block, all the same 4 fabrics. So let's just go over this really quickly. There's 2 big squares that match both in the fabric 2 and fabric 10. Now the instructions say 5 7/8, but we're going to be making half square triangles. So if you want to bump this up and have a little wiggle room, you can take that up to a 5-inch square, and that's what I did with these 2. So it's up to you. Either way, they also both have 2 7/8 squares, and both of these are going to be cut in diagonal in half once before we get going. Not to be outdone, there's fabric 3 with some 3 3/8. These are going to stay that shape. They're going to be on point. You can see in the picture. And then there's 2 different sizes of squares in that fabric 7, and that smaller one is going to be cut in half diagonally. So in half pieces, this one, and this one, all those 2 7/8 out of fabrics 2, 7, and 10. So let's do that really quickly. Put those aside. There we go. And let's grab those biggest squares, whether you're doing the 4 7/8 or you're upping it to 5. It doesn't matter because we're going to turn these into half square triangles. So we're going to pair them off, one for each. And then you're going to want to draw a diagonal line down the center. Draw one down the center. We're going to doing a 1/4 inch stitch on either side, or if you've watched any of my videos, you know I like to use this guy right here. He is a 1/4 inch ruler. You can find these in different styles and shapes. Some of them have that slotted center line, some do not, but basically I like to use this guy because it gives me all the lines. I want all the lines. Less opportunity for me to screw up. So that middle line is the diagonal. That's going to be the cutting line. And then on either side, that's that 1/4 inch away from that center line. That's what I'm going to be stitching on. All right. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to take these to the machine and I'll be right back. All right, so there's the 2 squares all stitched out, either side of that line. So that center line, that's going to be where we cut them in half. And then you'll want to take these to the iron. Looks like I need to change out that blade. Here's your note. Go change out your blade for your rotary cutter. I'm going to press them towards the dark side, and then these need to measure at 4.5. And because I didn't do this 4 7/8 squares, I did the 5. I know that's just going to be a little bit bigger, so you can see that they are just ever so slightly bigger than 4.5. So I'm going to square them down to 4.5, making sure that I keep that pretty diagonal right in the center. All right, so do this with both of those squares, and let's move on to that next step. All right, step 2 is all about that one lonely little orange block, square I should say, and those chili triangles. We're going to be circling these chili triangles around that orange square. It's very food-based right now, isn't it? Chili and orange. All right, so we're going to do the 2 sides first, press them open, and then we're going to come back and do those other 2 sides. So it'll look a little something like that at the very end. This will also measure up to 4.5, just like those half square triangles we just finished. So I'll take a couple pictures as I go, and I'll see you at the very end of this block. Let's get stitching. Oh wait, one more thing. Before I send you on the way, I'm going to show you my trick to making sure that the triangles are centered properly on the square. So I do a little faux press there and right there, just a little one with my finger, and so I have a little crease, right? And I do the same thing with the triangles, so I get a little crease in them. Here we go. Now I can just line those creases up on top of one another. I like to throw a pin in for my travels to the machine. And I'll turn this around so you can see. See? Perfect little wings on either side. So there's my little trick. All right, now let's go get stitching. So there's that finished square. Remember, this is supposed to be 4.5 inches as well, just like those half square triangles. So go ahead and clean it up if you need to. I like to take my little dog ears off because I like it to be pretty before I put everything together. So do that, then come back and let's talk about the next step. All right, we're on to step number 3, and it's going to seem pretty familiar to step number 2. So we're going to do these with all 4 of the kind of bluish, creamy squares. So I'm just going to take one of them for right now. You're going to need 2 blue triangles for each and 2 orange ones as well. So I'm going to set all these others aside, and it's the same process, friends, except we're just putting the 2 orange ones along one side and the 2 blue ones along the other side. Exact same process though, right? We're just going to do 2 of them, stitch, stitch, press open, and then do the other 2, stitch, stitch, press open. Pretty easy peasy. You're just doing this 4 more times. This block is really coming together quickly. So let's do 4 of these blocks. I'll take a couple pictures as I go, and I'll see you on the other side. There we go. We have some finished blocks here, looking good. Everything should be an unfinished 4.5-inch square. So I'm doing the last couple of steps all in one because I like to lay out my block so I can see what it's going to look like in the very end. So this is the layout, and as you can imagine, we're going to start putting these rows together. I just want to point out a few things to keep your eyes on when you get there. Note that anytime these squares, on-point squares, are towards the edge, that's supposed to be 1/4 inch. So when you go to pin these together, it would be a good idea to have that square on the top so that you can aim for that cross where those 2 threads meet. That way you get a nice clean 1/4 inch right there. Similarly with these spots, I like to put a needle right there in the middle. So it doesn't matter which square you have on top, just as long as the pin goes through each point of those 2 squares. So you really make sure that you get some nice, clean, and crisp points. So we're going to put these together in rows, and then we're going to put the rows together. And because there's so much bulkiness here, I'm probably going to end up opening the seams. But just like I've said before, no quilt police. If you feel better pressing towards one side or the next, that's great. You might want to think about making all of them on the top and the bottom row going one direction and the other one going the opposite so they nest. But I think I'm going to do opening them up so that I make sure that these little spots right here are not incredibly bulky when we go to press at the very end. All right, if I have anything interesting to share as I go, I will take a couple more pictures and add some notes. Otherwise, let's get stitching and I'll show you my progress as I go to the machine. All right, there's our block. This is the Sawtooth Star. Let me just turn her over so you can see the back that I did open up all those seams. It lays a lot nicer this way. All right, so we're just making one of these. Remember, one of these, and there's 2 more blocks to go, so let's head into block number 2. All right, so the second block is the 1904 Star, and you'll see in the instructions that this one does have a template. It looks awful familiar. We've done this shape several times, so you know me. I turned it into a paper piecing. And I'll do a little quick video on that here in just a second, but let's talk about the fabric real quick. So there's our 4 pieces of fabric. We have the templates are going to be using the template or the paper piecing, no matter which way you go, is that dark blue and that light orange. The dark blue is the big piece right there in the center, and the orange is on either side. So whether you use the paper or the template version, you'll have plenty of extra fabric. You can see that that's much bigger than what we need for those pieces. Let's see, also in that blue we have a couple of squares. They're going to be cut diagonally. We have fabric 3, that's that pretty kind of cream color. You have 4 squares here too, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is going to be cut diagonally both ways, as is the chili squares. The chili square, I should say, that big one matches with that guy. It's also going to be cut both ways, so I'm just going to stack it here up on top. And then the small one, that's that center piece, very center of the block. So let's cut all of these squares in half or in half twice as instructed, and then we'll jump into this block. Let's go. All right, so let's just talk real quick about that paper piecing and tell you how I made it. If you look in the instructions, it'll tell you that once this block is put together, it should measure 4 3/4. That's the unfinished block size. So that's including that 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So if we take off a 1/4 inch from each side, that's half. Subtract that from the 4 3/4. That means that inside block, the finished block, is going to be 4 1/4. So that's what I started off with. I made that square. Let me turn this around so you can see it a little better. And you'll see that it is indeed 4 1/4. So I made the block 4 1/4. I added the 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So that's the 4 3/4. So I'll show this again. 4 3/4. And then half of 4 1/4 is 2 1/8. So let me just put the ruler up and I'll zoom in on. There is 2 1/8. So that's where I put that little dash line. You see that little dot right there? And that's what I aimed at from one corner to that dash to make the 2 smaller triangles. So these are the M pieces, the M and the N reversed in the template, and that's the L. Whichever way you go, you're going to have plenty of fabric to do either way. In the next video, I am actually using the templates, so you can actually see what I do with the templates as far as that's different from paper piecing. Paper piecing, this is my piece number 1, which is the blue. I have plenty of big pieces of blue, and then the 2 and the 3, or the M and the M reverse, that's that pretty pumpkin, one for each side. All right, so you've seen me do this before. I like to pre-fold all of my pieces first. It just makes it easier for me to go in and move along. There we go. So you're going to need 2 pieces of the orange. And I love batik. I love paper piecing batiks because I don't have to worry about right sides or wrong sides, because it's so forgiving, that batik. So there's that piece 1, right? Now that's a whole lot of extra stuff. So I'm going to fold back number 2 so I get it out of the way. You want to make sure your fabric's going to go all the way past, 1/4 inch past all of these lines. I'm just going to throw a little quick pin in just to hold everything in place. And I'm going to grab my handy dandy add a quarter ruler. You don't have to use this lovely ruler, but it comes in super handy. You can use your regular ruler and just line up 1/4 inch beyond the paper. But I like this because it has a little lip. Can you see the lip? Shine it in the light. There's a little lip. It just butts right up next to it. So I'm going to cut this extra piece of fabric off because we don't need it. And I'm going to take the orange piece. Here he is, hiding underneath. And you'll see it needs to face this way, right? So it goes like that. So that when it folds over this way here. Now you can see it. Folds over that way. So I'm going to put that right on top. Lining up my edges. I'm going to throw a pin in somewhere far away because I don't want the pin to get in the way of my needle when I go to stitch there. And I'm just going to verify. I'm just going to flip this paper over and just make sure it looks okay. Make sure it's going to cover all those pieces. Yep, it looks good. Because remember, we want that to go all the way beyond that 1/4 inch so we don't have any problems. So now I take this to the machine and I drop my needle right here at the top where all those 3 triangles meet. Drop it in and stitch all the way down, and I'm going to go through that seam allowance down here at the bobbin. So let's take this to the machine and I'll be right back. All right, there we go. Now don't forget, you want to shorten that stitch length. I know I forgot to mention it beforehand. Shorten your stitch length because whether you use this lovely Carol Doak paper for paper piecing or just regular printed office paper, if you shorten that stitch length, it's going to make more perforation. So when you go to rip this off at the very end, it's going to be much nicer. Let's take this to the iron, and I'm just going to press that open, and we'll come back and talk about the other side. Okay, there we go, all nicely pressed. So we do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to fold corner 3 down. I'm going to grab my add a quarter ruler, butt it up right next to that paper, and take away this extra. And there's that 3rd piece of fabric, and it's going to go right there. Turn this over. And I'm making sure it's going to indeed go beyond the edges. Throw a pin in, so again, somewhere away from where the stitching is going to happen. And you can see it goes all the way beyond that block. So now I can do that entire stitch, and I'm going to go through both seam allowances. So let me take this to the machine and I'll be right back. And there we go. I've already pressed it open, give it a nice press. So isn't that pretty the way it turns out? The last step with these blocks is, of course, trimming away the extras. So I'm just going to get my regular ruler out, and we'll do all 4 sides. There we go. Now you guys just gonna remove the paper, and you remove the paper in reverse order. So we start with number 3. I like to fold it back and give it a little kind of press with my fingernail, kind of score it a little bit, and it makes that coming off so easily. And don't worry about this little extra, because I have a tip to show you. And of course that last piece, here we go. Now, if you get a little bit of this extra paper, it's kind of stuck, just grab a pin and give it a little scrape. See how it scrapes just away? I got a little bit up there. There it is. Perfecto. Lovely. So we're going to do that 4 times, and then we'll move on to step number 2. So whether you're doing this side or the templates, get these blocks done, and I'll see you in just a moment. All right, so we finished the 4 pretty triangles. I guess they look like this. They're pointing down in the book. So set these aside. Of course, I've taken the paper off of all of mine, whether you've done the paper piecing or the template. So remember those triangles that we made out of the fabrics 3 and 10? That's that light blue and then that chili color. Save 4 of that small of the blue ones, because we're going to use it for a different step coming up. But with this step, you're going to need 3 of those triangles of the lightish blue and 1 of that kind of chili color. And it's going to look a little something like this. You know me, I like to lay everything out so I can kind of see where the end is going to take us. All right. So it's going to look like this. We're going to piece these 2 together so that we make a square. Then we attach 1 wing and then the second wing. So we're having a bunch of small triangles that we're making into 1 bigger triangle. Little tip. So remember, this was a square that we cut in half both ways. So there's lots of bias on these pieces. So I like to get out my little spray starch or best press to use that just to help keep everything from shifting around a little bit. So I know I'm going to spray them really good. I'm going to make sure I get my little threads off of here, off of the side too. You'll watch me take a couple of pictures as I go. I am probably going to press towards the dark side for the center one, and then probably in for each of the other ones. But we'll see. If I change my mind halfway through, I'll let you know. So I'll see you at the end with 4 of these bigger triangles. To the machine. All right, so there's the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I shaped them up a little bit, so there isn't a size that this should be, but it's going to be sitting next to this guy, and since this guy's just shy of 5 inches, this side, both sides need to be just about a little bit beyond. So I think that's going to be okay. We'll find out when we get to this step. But we have one more step to do before we can do that. That's that other square and triangle. So this is going to be the center of the block. And it looks a little something like this. And as you can imagine, we're going to do 2 sides. And then we'll add the other 2 sides to make it a square in a square. So of course, I'll take a few pictures as I go. And I'm probably going to press out. Let me just bring this one back so you can see I did press just the way I said I was going to. And yeah. Then we'll be ready to piece that block together. So let's do this guy, these 2, then these 2, and I'll see you in just a bit. Alright, so there's the square and a square. I trimmed it down and all the dog ears off. It is supposed to be 4 3/4, just like the orange and blue ones that we did at the step 1. Now before I get going, I want to bring all the pieces in, because if you've watched any of my videos, you know I like to see how it all comes together in. So let's zoom out. All right, so here's all of our blocks. Got the square and a square, that's the centerpiece, and actually it's on point. so that the center square is square. These guys are going to go attached to each of the flat sides like this. At the north, south, east, and west are the triangle pieces. And then don't get confused, because this is on point sort of right now. And some might think you want to add the blue here, but you're actually adding the blue, the last blue triangle, to the other blue piece. Right like that. All right. So the way the instructions work is that it has you looking at this in rows on the diagonal on the on point. So you're making these two same rows, the one in the middle, and then after those are all put together, you're going to go back and add the 4 blues and then add the 3 groups together in one block. I know it looks a little strange to me. I get what they're doing though. And I'll say that the thing that I'm curious most about is the triangles meeting up with this guy, because to my eyes, this piece looks a little big to what it ought to be right there. So we may need to doing a little fudging with these triangle pieces. I also don't know if it would be better to add the blue triangles right now to the outside and then add these pieces. I mean, that's kind of what my instinct tells me to do. Add the blue first and then the 2 triangles. It's kind of that's how I would do it originally, but they have you do the 3 pieces first and then go back and add the blue and then put the rows together. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to try one each way, and then I'm going to come back and tell you what my experience is, and you can decide what works for you, whether you want to follow directions or whether you want to try a little something different. Okay, so I'll see you in just a moment and I'll have some more information. Okay, friends, I'm back. So this corner, I added the blue first, and in this corner, I followed the instructions the way that they're written. And I'll be honest, there's not a whole lot of difference. Now, after finishing them, I feel like my biggest problem was what I anticipated were these triangles. You can see both on this one and this, these are the 2 that I started it. I had to adjust because you see it's not matching up over here. But when I got to the second one and I pulled that down a little bit, it lines up better. So I don't know if I did some cutting wrong or if it just needs to be a little smaller, that initial square, before we do our diagonal cuts. And that's why it's a little bigger than what it needs to be. But you know what? I am not going to worry about points right now. I know that I'm losing my points here against the orange. I'm going to say it's fine. It's one of those things where there's only one time you do the block. It's kind of hard to learn from it. But maybe if I have time at the end and if I have extra fabric, I may come back and revisit this block and make it a second time. I've also done that center row, as it were, diagonal row. And let me turn it over. I opened up these seams right here because there's a lot of bulk in those corners, and then I pressed out towards the blue. Please remember that these are supposed to be 1/4 inches, so that's where you want to line your pins up to make sure it hits the way it's supposed to. And if I'm looking really carefully, it looks like they're going to line up just fine, both with my version of piecing and the instructions version of piecing. So I'm going to put all of these together. I'm going to pay attention to that 1/4 inch right there. I'm going to pay attention to where the seams meet in these 4 corners, 1, 2, 3, 4. I am not going to square this block down though until the very end. When I talk about the very end, I mean like at the very, very end, just because I want to make sure that, you know, I'm not going to chop off something that I may need. This block, just like all of the others, is supposed to be 12.5 inches square, and it does look like it's going to end up being that way. I can kind of give you a sort of look, so it's pretty close. All right, so let's seam these two seams together, and I'll see you at the end with a completed block to the machine. And there she is, 1904 Star. Remember, this is 12.5 square, just like that first one. 2 down, 1 to go. Let's move on to that third and final block this month. Okay, third and final block is called Circling Swallows. And you'll notice there's some templates, so make sure you make your templates, whether you use paper or use some of the acrylic, which is what I got right here. Trace them on. Make sure it's important to put the little itty bitty notches, the diagonal notches down here at the bottom in each corner. Those are important because they're going to match up. Let's talk about what we got. Here's our 4 colors. We got some just shy of 3-inch squares. These are going to be cut in half diagonally, so I'm just going to hold them aside. There's some rectangles and some smaller squares. Fabric number 3 is template N. There they are right there. Fabric number 7, a couple of different squares. One is a 5 1/4. It's going to be cut diagonally both ways. And there's that 2 7/8, just like these blue ones. That's going to be cut in half just once. And last but not least is template P. It's that pretty fabric tin, that chili cut. You have 4 of the chili kind of fabrics and 4 of the blues. But before we jump in, let's cut some fabrics in half. I'm just going to stack them all right on top of each other. Make sure they're nice and straight. There we go. If you haven't traded your blade out for a new one, this is your reminder to do that. There's nothing better than a nice new blade. Okay, those are cut in half, and this big guy gets cut in half twice. I like to line them up on the lines, these little corners. Makes life a little easier to have something to look at. And in the other direction. Okay, everything's prepped and ready to go. Let's talk about step number 1. All right, step number 1 is using those template N's and P's. That's right, using our fabric 3 and 10. I'm going to take the templates off so we can talk about what we're going to do. You're going to first pair these all up. So each one gets a pair. Remember those notches that I talked about? They're going to match up when you go to seam. Just like that, corner to corner. You're going to do 4 of these. Let me just open everything up so it's easy to see. 2, 3, 4, because it's going to make a pretty little circle. Oh, a little kaleidoscope, you know, circling swallows. So you're going to do this 4 times. The creamy bluish white on top of the chili each time. All right, you're going to want to press all of these seams open, and the instructions even say that, because right in the center when we piece this together, there's going to be a bunch of seams, and trust me, you're going to want to have these seams pressed open. So do this 4 times, then we do the halves together. Then we do one last seam for the whole together. So, you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to take a few pictures as I go. Let's get stitching. So there's the circling swallow all finished. Let's talk about step 3. So there's a typo in step 3. It says to sew the 2 7/8 triangles to fabric 10, but that is wrong. It is actually the 5 1/4, the one that we did both ways, because all of these are going to go on there, but you can see that's a better match. So it's the bigger of the 2 triangles. Please remember that. It's the bigger. Those 2 7/8 triangles, those are going to be attached to the blue fabric in the next step. So what we're going to do here is all of these are going to be attached to fabric 10. And if you've seen my trick, to find the center, I like to do a little finger press. So I'm folding that right there so I get a nice little finger press right here. Use your nail or side of a ruler, or just pinch it with your finger. And I do the same thing with each triangle as well. I give it a little finger press. That way I know where the center is, and it's going to line up right there. I'm going to throw a little pin in so that I can take it to the machine. Stitch that across. Press it open. It's going to be on all 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. So it's going to make that, turn this into a square. So it'll look something like that when things get pressed out. All right, so let's do those 4, then come back and we'll move on to step number 4, to the machine. All right, so there's that finished block. I just, cleaned up the edges, got rid of the dog tails. It doesn't say what it's supposed to measure out at, but I'm at about 9 1/4-ish, just shy of 9 1/4-ish on each side. Let's grab the rest of the fabric and talk about what the next step is. All right, we got the blue square, the blue rectangle, the blue triangle, and the orange triangle. So the first unit we're going to make together is a square and 1 each of the triangles. And we're going to make a bigger triangle. There we go. So we sew one side, and I like to make sure that I'm matching there in the corners. That way when it presses open, this is a nice straight line. So we'll do that one side, press it open, and do the same thing on the other side. We'll do that 4 times, and then we'll move on to the rest of those blue triangles and these rectangles. So they're just going to be paired up, 1 on each. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to line those 2 corners up, seam down, and press open. That way it's a nice straight line there at the top. All right, so you're making 4 of these units and 4 of these bigger triangle units. So, you know what I'm going to say. Let's get stitching. All right, once you have those 2 units done, now we put them together to make an even bigger triangle. And I'm going to match these 2 corners up so that when it folds open, it'll be a nice straight line right there. So let's put that right there. And I'm going to throw a pin in just to travel on the way to the sewing machine. And we're going to do this 4 times so that we have 4 big triangle units. I'll see you in just a moment. Alrighty, now that you have those 3 corners done, and I just cleaned up the dog ears, it's time to do the last step for this block, which is to attach it. You'll see that that little triangle fits on there. So another good thing to do is to do my little fold in half and press so that you know where the halfway mark is at each point. That'll help you line it up when you take it to the machine. I am going to do the two opposite corners. I'm going to then press them open, and then I'll come back and do the two other corners, and that, my friends, will be that. We will be finished with circling swallows. 4 more seams. Let's get to it. I'll see you at the end. And there we go. Circling swallows, 1904, and Sawtooth Star. Congratulations, you have finished month number 10. You know what that means? 2 more months left. Guys, we are in the home stretch. Can't wait to see you next month. So please hit that subscribe. Give me a good old thumbs up. If you have any questions, put those in the description below. I do my best to answer all of them, and I will see you next month for the next block of the month. Have a good one, and I'll see you in my quilt lab next time. Bye-bye.